Our next case study is from Myfanwy Lawrence, who's the Product Development Manager for Walking and Cycling Precinct and Programme Development at Transport for New South Wales, and Zoe Green, who's the Service Designer at Meld Studios.
I'm Myfanwy Lawrence. I work for Transport for New South Wales in the infrastructure and place division. I lead a team which is really interested in how urban design and design-led thinking can actually bring better outcomes to both the built environment but also for active transport and walking and cycling.
And I'm Zoe. I work at a design and research company called Meld Studios. We work in lots of different contexts to understand really complex problems using a human-centered design approach when we work with and not for people. So that's how Myfanwy and I met, actually, and we'll talk a little bit more about our relationship as we go. And I'll learn how to use this as well.
Okay, so we thought we might get exactly what Safe Active Streets, which is where we're starting with the end in mind and actually defining what our conclusion, I suppose, was from our human-centered design research. So we're actually looking, and I must actually, before I go into this, I have a few things to declare. I've completely plagiarised the name of this project from Western Australia, who are also doing a Safe Active Street. They know they're fine with it. I'm not wedded to the name, but it actually comes up with a good acronym, and Transport for New South Wales is all about acronyms, so this project is known as the SAS program. Look, Safe Active Streets is not new. It's, you can call it a bike boulevard, you can call it a play street, you can call it many things. It's actually, what we're actually trying to look at is low speed environments, low volume environments where we can have streets which people feel comfortable to walk through, particularly children. And there's also a level of parental trust that kids can actually use this environment to make their way to school or places which they are actually important to them. What we are trying to, that we'll talk about during our talk, the approach that is different on this project is the fact that we want to take a customer-centred design approach to actually have the residents of these streets well embedded in the actual design and actually what we want the outcomes to be. And again, Western Australia has Perth has had some really great success in that customer-led design approach. So totally. We are actually building on Western Australia's great work. Okay, this slide is to get your attention. And really it's also to get your attention to say, we really do want to talk about a process. And it was great to hear Lucy's talk where she said she spent a lot of time talking about an idea. We are in the talking phase. We have a great idea and we want to take it forward. And what we're going to set out is the process that we've done so far and how you actually build resilience through that process and how you keep going and try and make that good idea into a thing. Because at the moment we have a great idea and we want to make it into a thing. It's not quite there. So hopefully we can have a thing as successful as the Healthy Streets project in the UK. So
exactly. So I want to give a little bit of theory first. Who's heard of human-centered design? Yeah. It's a great, I think a lot of people now know, and I think the thing that I loved about Myfanwy, she once said to me, I've been doing this my whole career, but now I just have this term. Like I can call it human-centered design or customer-centered design. What it really is about though, it's about putting people at the center and it's about the humans. We are all humans. We need to remember that at times. It's hard because we're all so shit, but we really are just humans. So we need to remember it. And it's about solving the right problem. It's not about putting ourselves into solution mode, but it's really about understanding the complexity and the nuance and the messy noodle soup that is life. And it's about, within that noodle soup, figuring out all the connections and what's related, what actually is the sense and what is the meaning behind it. So as we do this, it's about engaging people along the way. And in doing that, we really need to ask them about the what. We need to ask them about the when do you do this? And the where. So maybe it's about public transport, and what we're asking them is, so what type of modes do you take and when do you take them and where do you go? That gives us a really nice overview, but it's the why that is really, really important there. If you don't understand the why, you don't understand the intent, you don't understand the motivation. And that is really what is at the core of human-centered design. Why? Constantly asking why and being that really annoying 5-year-old that's just learned that word. So understanding the why gives us confidence that we are investing in the right services at the right time for people that will actually use them, because they've told us that they've used them. They've told us that that's what they want. And so we're actually de-risking a project. The catalyst for the project, now that we've got a bit of an overview of the human-centred design process, was the Integrated Services Plan for Northwest Sydney. So Meld Studios has a long relationship with Transport for New South Wales and Sydney Metro, and we were asked to come in to design a seamless door-to-door experience, transport experience that meets the needs of people living in Northwest Sydney. The catalyst of this was the launch of the $8 billion Sydney Metro that's just rolled out, but it was really about understanding what are customers doing in this area, what are residents and citizens doing in the Northwest, how are they getting places, why are they going places, and we really needed to provide at the end a realistic model that kind of leaves that car at home. I opt for my Opal card or my walking shoes instead of my car keys when I leave the house.
And what was unique about this study is usually when transport, and this is a bit of a confession, usually when we do an integrated transport plan, it's a bus plan. It's how we change bus services to actually integrate with whatever the new services came in. So this plan was actually quite unique for the fact, and I know there's no bus planners in the room from transport. So they're a bit unsettled because we were looking at outside the bus planning realm as well, and that's really how we got such fertile research.
Exactly. We were bringing all modes together. How does all of that stuff connect? The interchange experience, getting from the bus to the train, getting the kids to school, what does that look like? And so it was a new model, a methodology using human-centered design to create a transport plan. So this was our process. We engaged about 60 people plus 60 stakeholders within government, cross-government providers, and led them through a human-centered design approach to understand the why. So this is where we met Myfanwy in our project room in Chatswood, and she would come in and we would just ask a question. So tell us what you do. An hour later, we hadn't talked and she'd told us everything, and it was amazing. And we had all of this really rich, fertile knowledge. And what we were able to do was synthesize, bring in the customer insights of the 60 residents we'd spoken to. We'd be able to take ideas that Myfanwy had and her team, we could take them out to the public as well and start testing them. You can see an example down here in the far corner of actually using the mock station at Cudgegong Row, which is now Talong Station, to actually test out what bus plans might look like, what do shared pathways look like in the context, and what would you expect? What are the expectations around this?
And one of the interesting things about that process is the Safe Active Street solution that we're now going forward with as an idea was one, I think it was probably, a 5-minute conversation. Hey, there's this really great idea, it's been done internationally, it's been done in other jurisdictions. Wouldn't it be good if we actually had one of these and we had it as part of one of our missing links? And that's where you have that sort of one idea can then make this progression.
It's one idea to solve a big problem, because just one idea won't just solve it. It's not one solution, it's many. And so in doing this, we take this approach of a design process where we really sit in that problem space and understand the complexity, and we go wide and we get everything that we need, and then we come in and we define what that means. And once we've understood the problem, then we define a solution, the many solutions. And this was our process. So it was one. We also had lots of different ideas and concepts around buses and trains and cycling, and what will all of these things look like together? So what did we find out of this process, which took about 8 months, 5 months at the end of 2017.
So the really interesting thing from a walking and cycling perspective and from a health perspective is that the key decision-making time for us to determine our entire day's transport choices is actually the return journey home. So it's not when you get out of bed and you leave in the morning, it's what you're doing on your return journey. So who you have to pick up, what other chores you have to do, what time of day it is, whether the services are accessible for you at that time of day, that is the decision point. So what we actually found is, this is an area which has been car dependent for a very long time, has lots of families, they have lots of kids doing extracurricular activities. That end of the day was pretty much mum taxi time. That was time when you had to pick up the kids, you had to take them to all those various different activities, pick them up and take them home. So it's like, okay, so how can we look at that problem differently. How about we try and set up a system where the kids that are actually can travel independently can go and do that travel themselves, and allow parents to go and do another activity which actually mightn't be a mum's taxi trip. It might actually be being able to catch metro, because you have now, you're happy that your kids, and you're confident that your kids can go and do those journeys safely. This is where Safe Active Streets come in. It's like, okay, if we can, and again, through interviews, the missing link in the process was shared paths are okay, dedicated cycle is okay. The place where we're most nervous is those local streets which don't really fit into the current system.
Exactly.
They don't have passive surveillance. We don't know whether our kids are safe to walk down them because they're just a street. There's no footpaths. It's kind of that space, that forgotten space. Hence, Safe Active Streets.
Exactly. And so this was one of the biggest insights that we had out of the research that we'd done. And what that actually helped us to define were customer value propositions for all different modes, including Safe Active Streets. But it let us really explore all the different solutions. What these do is they provide a joined up holistic customer perspective of the experience that they hope to see in the future from Transport for New South Wales. And what we can do is we can then dive in and have a look at what active modes actually looks like more specifically. This is where we could really define Safe Active Streets in their perspective, from the customer's view, what needs to be in place and at what times, which Myfanwy's team helped us to define. At what time do we need to contact councils or involve them into our workshops? What is our short-term plan, our long-term plan? And we could start to define these together to actually give you something, a tool that you could then take out into the world and start to implement.
Okay, so it was interesting that Lucy mentioned that lots of policies become policies and then they get put on a shelf and left there. So it's something that we really wanted to avoid. So part of the great things that the Integrated Transport Plan has, it actually has a time frame. Seemed like a long time ago when we actually put it in place, but it also has milestones around prototyping. So this is actually learning by doing. So the whole idea about this project is we go out, we nominate a site, we find a site, we run the customer centre design with that street, we actually implement the street, and we do some pre and post surveys, and then we learn from that experience, and then we go to another site, and then we do it again, and then we do it again, and then do it again. So that's our big idea. The prototyping is actually our big idea. So really we're in this really interesting situation now where we're keeping the idea alive while we get that prototype up and running.
Exactly, and we just want to give you a little bit of history of how we got here. I know we have 5 minutes. So, keeping the last 3.5 years within about a minute, I guess, Meld Studios came in and we did lots of different types of research across transport, across the city, and it was actually at the point of using the case study of the Integrated Services Plan within the Northwest is when we met Myf and her team, and she popped in and going, hey, what you doing in here? Can I help? And at that point, we started this relationship. We delivered these customer value propositions, and one of the risks as a consultant is I would hate for my work to sit in a drawer. So how do we keep it alive?
So it really is small steps, and it's interesting, you really lose you forget how long you've been doing something when you're doing it in small little bits. So it always, 2017 seems like a long time ago now.
Sure does.
So really what we've done is very, very slowly just kept momentum on this project. We've formed partnerships, we've identified prototype sites, we've held workshops, and that is really key to keeping this idea alive, is actually finding people who are aligned with what you want to do, who can help you and can actually then give you in-kind support, which then gives them something that they need, but also helps you keep that idea. And I can see Helen looking at the screen there. She's been a great help through Area Health. We've formed working groups with Parramatta Council. We now have a prototype site in Parramatta Council. And when I say a prototype site, it is a street they have promised not to do anything to until we get to it. So they're actually building a cycleway on either side of it, and they're keeping that street as a blank canvas for us. So when we go in and want to do our community design process, we've actually got a canvas to actually run that on. But in the meantime, we run a baseline survey with that community. We've got, usually baseline surveys with communities which are letterbox dropped, you get the usual 10 people and their dog. We've had over 400 responses to that survey, and that's all around what do you think of your street, how often do you walk, what's your tree canopy like, all these questions that are very broad, and we will then replicate that study in 12 months' time, regardless of what our intervention is. We've also got a good working relationship with Adam Lickman's team in the Office of Open Space, and we're sort of keeping eyes on what he's doing with his 5 Million Trees project, because they have trees, we want a leafy street, perfect match, let's work together and try and get those prototype sites up as well. So I suppose the takeaway from really these 3 years is it is actually really relationship building. It is finding the people who you can work with and finding the people who you can work with in kind while you're looking for that project champion, and also that funding to take it to the next step.
Exactly. It's a nice segue into what we've learned. What are our key learnings that we take out of this process with Myfanwy reflecting, which has been a really nice process in itself. We're still learning, by the way, always very human. The first one is you need perseverance. She has it. It's incredible. Every time I catch up with her, it's like, I've done this little bit, and it's really empowering to see you run with our work and the work that we created together to make this real. The next one, continuously share, learn, fail, iterate, and reflect. This is a process in itself, and we should be going through this. We should take more time to actually fail at stuff so we can make stuff better. We should take more time to prototype and be rough and just put stuff out into the world rather than making it perfect before we do it. Let's actually take this process on board. It's all about relationships. It really is, and the relationship that we've built as kind of before client consultant becomes more of a different relationship where we can just have a casual chat about what is Safe Active Streets, what are you doing, how's your dog, oh yeah, do you want a glass of rosé? It actually starts to build out to be a little bit more, and that's really valuable that we keep this going, because I'm invested. I spent a lot of time and tears and pain doing this project with her, and so I want to see it succeed as much as she does.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. It's about embracing and just trusting the ambiguity of a process and the program of work that you need to do, because it's messy and ugly and grey, and you have to sit in it and unfortunately be okay at those points, which is difficult. We like things to make sense. And the last one is you've got to celebrate the success.
So we actually won a design award for the process that we did for the integrated transport plan, which is actually a really good reflection on the fact that the team worked really well together and those relationships worked well. And it is about this is a big success, but it's about celebrating the small successes you have along the way as well, because this process will take a long time and we need to acknowledge every success that we have.
Exactly. I'm hoping we have at least 1 more minute. Great.
We can do this quickly.
We've got a really simple, reflective thing about, so why should you use human-centered design going forward rather than just sticking to the data? Data is great, but you also need the why behind it. So I really want to paint a picture of the Northwest. So there's a standard for buses that there should be a bus stop within 400 meters of walking for 80% of the population. Cool, great standard, 400 meters. What does that actually mean though? It's also as the crow flies. So it's straight over. You can't do this all the time. It's very convoluted. It ends up 800. So what does 400 meters look like in practice? Well, in the Northwest, it's called the hills for a reason. It's bloody hilly. It's really hot out there. It's 40 degrees in summer, especially out in a really big concrete land mass. It's far enough away from the city that it provides kind of a nice family aspect, and housing prices are generally kind of affordable, more affordable out there. So lots of houses, kids, 2, 3.5 kids maybe, the dog, and also there's it's been really underserved by public transport in the past. They've just had the bus, now they have a metro. What that means is that they've got 3 cars in the garage. It's really car driven, car centric. As soon as I turn 16, I'm in there. So in this context, it actually means a choice between getting the Opal card and the key. If we don't understand this nuance, the car's going to win every time. So we might not pick up the Opal card. We might not put on our shoes to do that walk instead. And we really need to understand customers' lives so we can de-risk delivering services that they won't use or that they don't need.
That's it.
Thank you.